We've got less than 2 weeks to go in this election, and we've been telling you how close it is. Historically close. Closer than ever. But here's a question. What if it's not? All right, CNN senior data reporter Harry Enten is here. And as close as it is,
yes, sir.
And we do believe it's super close right now, that also means that if things change even just a little bit, it's not really close.
It isn't. You know, so we have been talking about the idea that there's going to be a historically close election. I think I might have said it on this particular program, but in fact, will the winner get at least 300 electoral votes? The answer is majority yes. There's a majority yes chance, 60% chance that the winner of this election gets at least 300 electoral votes versus just a 40% chance that the winner ends up getting less than 300 electoral votes. So for all the talk that we've had about this election being historically close, which it is, chances are the winner will still actually score a relative blowout in the Electoral College.
Oh my God, you're making my hair hurt.
Boom.
How can it be that it's so close, but yet still more likely than not that it's a fairly big victory in the Electoral College?
Yeah, so let's take a look at that polling average, all right? So if you look across the 7 key swing states, the 7 closest states, in all of them, the margin right now is under 2 points, under 2 points. But keep in mind, polling ain't perfect, my dear friends. On average, since 1972, in the battleground states, in the key swing states, the average error in the key swing states is 3.4 points. So if all of the battleground states go in one direction, you can end up with a map like this for Kamala Harris, where she wins all the key Great Lake battleground states, wins North Carolina, wins Georgia, wins Arizona, wins Nevada, and she gets to 319.
That's even better than Biden did.
That's even better than Biden did. Of course, it could go in the other direction, whereby Trump wins all the key Great Lake battleground states, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, and he gets to 312 electoral votes.
And that's even better than Trump did in 2016.
Exactly right. So based upon what we see with the average polling error and how close the states are at this point, if all of the states move in one direction, one of these candidates could score a relative blow in the Electoral College, win 300 plus electoral votes.
What does history tell us about the possibility of all these states moving in one direction?
History tells us that it is more likely than not that all of the swing state polling errors would move in one direction. So in 2012, 92% of the states moved in Obama's direction. That is, the polls underdid Obama. In 2016, 83% of the swing states moved together because the polls underdid Donald Trump. Of course, we all remember that. And how about in 2020? 100% of the swing state polling averages underestimated Donald Trump, and so he did better than a lot of folks thought. So this time around, don't be surprised if the swing state polls, when they underestimate one candidate, they underestimate all of them in the states, and that would lead to a relative Electoral College blowout with one of the candidates winning at least 300 electoral
And Harry,
votes.
finally, what did you learn about the word underdid?
It is a real word. It is a real word. I underdid my dictionary growing up, and I found out that I still have words that I need to learn.
There you go. Harry Enten, thank
you
you very much. News you can use. Vice President Harris is set to deliver a speech at the Ellipse next week. We just learned that she's going to give this speech at the same location as Donald Trump's January 6th rally in 2021. This will be a closing argument speech, hitting the themes that she has been hitting lately. Last night at the town hall, she called Donald Trump a fascist. She's going to question his fitness for office. Now, Politico notes this morning, their headline in the Political Playbook is How Harris Ended Up Sounding Like Biden. Remember, Joe Biden, the threat to democracy that Donald Trump, he believes was the main theme of his campaign. With us now is Senator Chris Coons from Delaware, co-chair of the Harris-Walz campaign. So, Senator, to that point, Kamala Harris calling Donald Trump a fascist, talking about threats to democracy, holding that rally on the Ellipse next week as part of the closing argument. Why the shift from, first of all, joy, second of all, I'm going to help the middle class, to threats to democracy, and do you believe it's the right one?
Well, John, I thought she had a great town hall last night in Pennsylvania, where Vice President Harris showed an open-hearted and an optimistic side. She got asked direct questions by undecided voters in Pennsylvania, and it wandered into subjects like how does she process grief, how does she make decisions, about her personal faith, and I think that was very positive. She also talked about specific ideas she has for reducing costs like housing, childcare, healthcare. But John, you're right. She also ended up talking about how Donald Trump is an existential threat to our democracy. It's not that she's made a shift in tone, it's that Donald Trump has not just continued to have rally after rally where he says alarming and concerning and off balance things, but that's accelerated. The news broken by the New York Times this week that Donald Trump's longest serving chief of staff, former Marine Corps General John Kelly, believes that Trump has the instincts of a fascist, that he admires authoritarians, that he's privately said complimentary things about Adolf Hitler. That was the news that propelled her comments last night. But frankly, that's nothing new. That's just what those who serve most closely with Trump in his White House, in national service and intelligence and national security roles, forgive me, they all say the same thing, that he's too great a risk for us to take.
What about the argument that we've heard right here on this show from Governor Chris Sununu, the Republican from New Hampshire, who says the fact that Donald Trump says nice things about Hitler, well, that's baked into the cake at this point?
Look, I think there are still undecided voters. We heard from them last night in that great town hall, which could have been a debate had Donald Trump had the courage to show up and actually debate Kamala Harris. And those undecided voters are just tuning into this election. So even though we had a great convention, there was a debate between Trump and Harris now weeks ago, there are folks who need to hear one more time. Here's their economic ideas. Donald Trump has a terrible idea to impose a 20% nationwide sales tax that he calls a tariff on all imported goods. That means your groceries, your clothes, your furniture, your cars, everything that comes into this country from anywhere, he wants to increase their costs. Kamala Harris has ideas for how to address housing, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, childcare, and make taxes fairer. You look at those two ideas, and independent reviewers like, for example, Goldman Sachs, say if Trump gets to enact his ideas, inflation will go up, growth will go down. Kamala Harris, inflation goes down, growth goes up. I do think we need to keep making the case, and I'm looking forward to Vice President Harris's closing argument this coming week.
So the Wall Street Journal has a new poll out overnight, and some of the underlying numbers show what other polls have shown also, that on the question of in which direction is the country headed, right track, wrong track, right now, only 26% say the country's headed in the right direction. 64% say the wrong track, and that number's getting worse from August, Senator. I mean, how challenging is it for an incumbent party to run into those headwinds?
So, John, it's important to get into some of the internals of polls that show that right track, wrong track number. More and more Americans think that their own economic situation and of their community is getting better as there are more jobs available, as the manufacturing rebirth that was started under President Biden and Kamala Harris because of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, because of the CHIPS and Science bill. Folks are feeling better about their own prospects, but they are very worried about the country being on the wrong track. And that's largely because of political division. Look, as I've campaigned across the country recently in Ohio and Michigan, Arizona, and nearby in Pennsylvania, I hear a lot of concern from folks about the future of the country.
Sure.
Now, that's for different reasons in different places, but they are concerned in large part because of the division and the nastiness they're seeing on their televisions, in TV ads, and in discussions they're having with family and friends about this election.
Just to that point, finally, on the whole fascism discussion, I suppose there are two things that the Harris campaign needs to do here. It's A, to convince voters that Donald Trump is a fascist, and they're saying, look at what John Kelly said to work with him. But then you also have to convince voters, maybe Republicans, maybe people in the middle, that they care. I mean, what will it say to you if people don't care that those close to Donald Trump say he's a fascist?
I have a very hard time believing that Americans will look hard at these two candidates and say, oh, I don't really care if Donald Trump violates the Constitution, turns the military on his internal enemies. Her closing summary that Donald Trump has an enemies list and she has a to-do list that she's open to ideas from wherever they might come, that she wants to work across the aisle and solve the pressing problems that face our nation going forward. I have a hard time believing that the average American will look at that contrast and choose Donald Trump if they believe what Republican after Republican has now come out and said publicly. Look, conservative Congressman, former Congressman Fred Upton just said yesterday that he voted for Kamala Harris. He's joining a long list, like my friend Jeff Flake, former conservative Republican from Arizona. Liz Cheney was just here in Pennsylvania a few days ago campaigning with Vice President Harris. You don't see the same thing happening with Democrats who are endorsing Donald Trump. But there are dozens of Republicans, mayors, members of the House, members of the Senate, and his own cabinet who are publicly cautioning he's too great a risk to take.
Senator Chris Coons from Delaware, thanks for being with us this morning.